I like that one. Yeah, good job, Carla. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Carla and I make videos on project management, corporate soft skills, any kind of skills that get us through this corporate capitalist society that we live in. And I try to do it from the immigrant first generation lens just because that's my background. Today I am going to make a video on the top 10 biggest mistakes that I made as a newbie project manager during that transition from engineer and doer into more of a high-level industry leader, because I definitely made a lot of those mistakes. So even though it's a cliche, I do believe that making mistakes and failing is the best way to learn and the best way to improve upon your skills. I've failed multiple times, made many mistakes, had some pretty tough feedback, and even gotten some projects taken away. However, that never stopped me from improving upon my skills, getting better and better, and more comfortable in a leadership role. So let's get into it. Let's get through my top 10 mistakes. These aren't in any particular order. They're more of just kind of a stream of consciousness that I wanted to share with the world. All right, my first one that I wanted to share is not understanding the steps to get to the final goal or objective of your project. I think many times we get kind of bogged down in the details and forget to get out of those details, push yourself to kind of think high level, think more in a process way, and understand the pieces and the elements that need to happen in order to get to a final objective. In my case, I would get really bogged down on the civil engineering aspects of things without realizing that that is no longer my role. My role is to really understand the project high level and the pieces that go into that project, every single step that needs to happen in order to complete a project, and find the right resources that will complete this project in a successful manner. Getting out of that kind of mentality of the solutions, the nitty-grittiness of a project, especially when you've been that person who does that role, and when you've been the engineer in the nitty-grittiness of the project, is very hard to do. So that would be one of my first mistakes, basically not understanding what a project manager is really there for and how they're more now in a supporting role. You're there to ensure the success of your team, and also not understanding that you're more there to understand the process as a whole, not the minute details. All right, mistake number 2, not understanding that a project manager or leader is more than the person who gets updates from their discipline leads about how the project is going. So that kind of contradicts my first point a little bit, but it doesn't. Basically, a good project manager not only understands the process of the project, but really understands the elements that go into a project. So it's not just your disciplines are the ones who give an update, but you're leading them through this kind of path to the completion of your whatever it is you're working on. In my case, it's usually a plan set, an estimate, and a specification for a certain infrastructure project. Basically, when you're on a progress meeting or a check meeting, it's not just about, okay, discipline 1, what's your update? Discipline 2, what's your update? Discipline 3, what's your update? Which is definitely something that I did during my first project management role, where I wasn't leading them. I wasn't doing any actual leading. I was expecting them to figure out the path to our objective and to come to me with updates on the project. Basically, I wasn't taking charge of the project as a whole. I wasn't able to guide my disciplines into, all right, we know that our schedule says that we have to submit plans, 30% plans in November. Today is August. What are the steps that we need to do to get to that point? We need to talk to stakeholder A. We need to talk to stakeholder D, because I need to understand the decisions that you need in order to continue and be able to submit on the date that we are expecting to submit, right? I didn't used to do that. I was also not aware of what was going on in the project, which as a project manager, you should be in high level aware of the issues. I wasn't taking charge in terms of what are the decisions that we need from the stakeholders, what are the decisions that we need from the client, what are the decisions that we need from, each discipline and coordination, what resources did anyone need, and basically getting feedback from them whether this schedule actually made sense. So there was a lot of me just kind of being there, getting an update from them, letting them know, okay, our submittal's in November, and then just kind of expecting it to happen without any true leadership going on. I was also not providing leadership to the client. So I was allowing my team to come to the table and basically give updates to the client without me saying, all right, this was our objective this week. This is what we've done. This is what we need from you. Here's the input, etc. And I was just kind of allowing the team to run it without any real head. You want a leader who's there with you and actually helps guides the team to a certain goal. Not just someone who has expectations and expects the team to do it without really any guidance. Mistake number 3, not anticipating issues, whether it's design issues or resource issues, decision issues that will impact the schedule and will require the deliverable to slip. Essentially, I wasn't aware enough of what was going on in the project with the project team to be able to understand that there were any issues. I wasn't proactive in terms of meeting with my team and checking in on them. Even when something small that could potentially become an issue later on happened, I didn't know about it until, when it was too late to do anything about it. I wasn't talking with them enough to understand that they had other projects that would potentially conflict with my project. And this eventually became an issue because there was resources constraints. And when there's resources constraints and you haven't managed that, there's really nothing you can do. You can't have one person work 48 hours in one day with conflicting design budgets and schedules going on. I also wasn't checking in with them frequently enough where I would be privy to design issues that should have been brought up to the client or to the stakeholders or with other disciplines with enough anticipation to resolve them. And that was on me because I think I was trying to not be a micromanager at the beginning. I was trying to avoid as much as possible to micromanage teams and allow them to do their thing. Now I'm trying to find a balance between not being a micromanager and still being involved enough in the weeds. I'll let you know when I'm successful. But that was essentially my problem, that I wasn't kind of really understanding what the team needed. So it's definitely one of my mistakes, is not anticipating issues and not understanding that that was kind of my role. It was to really get my discipline leads to talk to each other, to coordinate with each other, to make sure that they talk to me, and making sure that I'm available enough, and that basically forcing the team to talk to each other. So now I'm a little more trying to balance that micromanaging side of me and make it more of a communication side. Let's talk to each other. You have the reins to do anything you want, but let's talk. Let's see what's in there. Let's really dig into the weeds in terms of communication, right? And so I really had to figure out that balance between true communication, efficient, real communication, and being a micromanager. My next mistake was not tracking budget and not being transparent about budget. That is something that I learned from one of my most recent project managers, being their deputy, and seeing that he had this kind of table that tracked the budget, basically said, this is the budget that we have. This is how much has been spent to date. This is how much was spent this week. And this is how much we have left, right? And this is how much time we have left to complete the project. So he did this very transparently, where this table with the budget, the remaining budget, went out to the team in terms of their hours and how much time they had left or how much money they had left in their budget. And it was something that he was very consistent with. And I was not like that, mainly because I didn't know that that was a thing that I could do. I had to grow up a little to really understand how empowered I was to kind of become a project manager and learn the tools that were available to me. This project manager was very transparent about things like that. I very much learned a lot from him, because previously I would tell people, oh, you have a lot of budget. Oh, we're okay. The budget's fine. But you really don't help them understand, but how much budget do I really have, right? Can I get my E1 on this so I can have more resources? Or is it something that I have to do very quickly because there's no budget on there? And this can really make or break your budget and your finances on a project. Obviously, there's things like contingency and non-billable hours, things like that, that you as a project manager take care of on a project to ensure that there's some fluff for your engineers and your team. However, in general, you really want to be able to kind of share where we're standing in terms of budget, because it'll also bring up things like, oh, you know what? This is out of scope. We're going to kill the budget here. We're going to go blow through the budget because it's out of scope. But we caught it because I understand how much budget I have and how much time I have in order to complete this project. So I want to make sure that I'm transparent with my project manager by telling her or him why I am going to go over budget. So it really helps with the managing aspect of it as well. Mistake number 5 that I did is not being all inclusive. I don't know why I was this way. I don't know if I just didn't understand, or it just didn't, the light bulb did not shine very brightly in there. Essentially, what I would do is I would go and have these conversations with the civil lead and then the structural engineer, but then we wouldn't talk to the drainage engineer, or I would go ahead and just tell the CAD manager without telling all the disciplines about a change, about when we received a topography, a background that you usually need as an engineer, or about how we were going to manage the folders, or anything in general. I was just not including the entire team on things like that. And it became a big issue when it came to coordination and consistency in work product. And then I realized if I just have everyone on the call and just let everyone know exactly what's going on in 1 hour, that prevents hundreds of hours of miscommunication and rework because someone did it an old way, or someone didn't understand the process because it wasn't shared, or someone used an old topo because the new topo wasn't shared. I've learned that you have to keep this very, very open and inclusive line of communication with your entire project team, from the junior engineer all the way to your project control people. Obviously, there are moments that it's kind of unnecessary, and as well as moments where I trust my lead engineers to communicate to their team, especially when you have a bigger project on your hands where the meeting starts becoming 50 people, and that's not efficient. You kind of start trusting your design leads to dissipate that information. However, I do like to make sure that it's said out loud. Please make sure that you talk to your project teams and your project partners. I also like to send out a communication email with everyone on it. I think it's efficient and it just saves you so much time, and everyone's on the right page and no one feels left out. Smaller projects, you can definitely just add everyone to the phone and talk to everyone at the same time. So that's not that big of a deal. Mistake number 6. Oh, it's basically the same as mistake number 5. And not being inclusive of all the team and piecemealing information. You really want to be that full transparent kind of person, and not piecemeal information. There are times, I want to be careful saying this, but there are times where perhaps the information that you have isn't complete and isn't a full decision. So you don't want to spread that information out to everyone because there's still data missing from it, right? So perhaps you tell your leads in case something's going to happen, kind of risk mitigation process, but not the entire team needs to know it at that point. However, in general, do not piecemeal your information. Give it to everyone, even people who you might not think need it, but it'll prevent a lot of hours of rework. Number 7, not managing the client and always saying yes. Client service is still important. However, you really want to make sure that you understand your scope, that as much as you want to have that client service, you also do not want to get yourself in trouble with scope creep, scope changes. If you are allowing scope creep and scope changes to happen without managing the expectations from the client, you'll end up in a situation where you're over budget and you're going to have to go to them and say, I need more money. They're not going to like that. There's obviously a balance between providing client service and ensuring that your client is happy. And I know I like to be a little overly helpful to my client, whether that means, finding a answer to a question that they had by connecting them with some experts in our field and things like that I really like to be able to provide to my clients. However, it is also important that you are not a yes man or yes woman, and that you are managing client expectations, managing the scope, managing the budget as it is, and ensuring that when you are providing some client service, in addition to, the scope and budget and whatever's established in your contract, you're not doing it in a way that will negatively impact your team, the budget, the relationship that you have with your client. So that is mistake number 7 that I definitely did at one point, just saying yes to anything. As much as you do want to have this client service, you also want to ensure that your project team is protected, that you're protected, that your company's protected. And I'm sure that will foster some respect from your client as well. Another mistake that I made, I think we're on number 8 right now, is not understanding your contract type and project management, basically 101. Yeah, project management 101 is, your budget, your schedule, your scope, making sure that you deliver this all packaged up and in a bow and that you somehow made some profit. However, there's a lot of financial kind of knowledge behind being a project manager, understanding your contract type, understanding the invoices, the financing, the return on investment, the net margin, I don't know. There's so much. There's so much that I'm still learning even now. And it's really important that you, at a minimum, understand your contract type, understand your rates, understand your net margin, understand really the financial side of your budget. Because I've definitely gotten myself in some trouble not understanding my contract type and not understanding how it capped my rates. And so that kind of got me into some trouble of not understanding my net margin and how that eroded and how the contract was set up and how I needed to ensure that I wasn't losing money, essentially. I was able to get myself out of that, and I learned a big lesson on contracts, rates, all of that. But it's really important that as a project manager, especially if you're coming from a very organic way of becoming a project manager, which is essentially you've done the work before, you know how it works, you know what disciplines go into it, you know how to build something, you know how to complete a project, whether that's a product or the infrastructure or a process or system, whatever it is. That you've become organically the leader in that industry. Now you got to start opening up your mind to kind of the finance world and really understanding contracts and all the financial terms in that sense. I'm very fortunate that my company kind of teaches us and puts us through a training process. But I could see other situations where potentially you're kind of just learning it as you go. My next mistake that I made, that's all the mistakes I've made have been kind of just a process of testing it out, failing, making that mistake. Okay, that worked there. Did it work over here? No, it didn't. So I have to adjust over here, and figuring out what works. And I am still learning, and I hope to, improve upon my own skills as I go and as I, gain more and more opportunity. But one of my other mistakes that I made, and it contradicts something I've said, I'm sure, at the beginning, is not being micromanaging enough. This is in a different situation, however. I know I talked about understanding that I didn't have to be in the weeds of the actual design, but this is more in terms of ensuring that my team understood the schedule and ensuring that they had the appropriate resources. And I do think I already spoke on this. But essentially, I got myself into a pickle because I had trusted my team to figure out who's going to package everything up, who's going to lead the QC process, trusting the team to get themselves through this process and be able to have a completed package on the due date. Big mistake. That did not happen. We did not have a compiled set. So we were late a couple weeks because we had to get through that process, because I was not managing enough that aspect of the project. I needed to really get in there and ensure that my team knew every process that they had to go through. Understanding the systems and processes that a team has to go through, that a project team has to go through, is kind of important as a manager, so that even though you're not the one going through those systems and processes, such a corporate word or corporate phrase, you still have to ensure that they successfully go through them. So finally, mistake number 10. And this one I actually learned from a conference that I went to, and there was a speaker, and she was awesome. I got so many things from her. But this was my biggest one that I've learned as a project manager. And I would say all the other ones you will learn. Eventually you will learn, how to balance out your communication skills, how to balance out how involved you need to be. All of that you will learn. But this one wasn't spelled out for me until I heard her say it out loud. And so now I'm very careful about it. I would say this was my biggest lesson learned. And it's not setting expectations, not being incredibly transparent and articulate about your expectations. I have learned the hard way that if you don't say it out loud and you just assume that a project team knows what they need to do or what you expect from them, that will get you into a lot of trouble. And this kind of setting your expectations isn't just important as a project manager. It's important in every aspect, every role, every conversation that you have. And it's something that I've adopted very fiercely to ensure that I am setting expectations and I'm very clear about them. So essentially, if I did not set my expectations out loud and someone didn't meet them, I kind of beat myself up for it, not really them, because I wasn't clear about them. And it's really become this thing where even if I'm talking to an extremely experienced project team or person or engineer, I've learned the hard way that you have to spell out what you expect. I expect a final product from you that has gone through quality control, all the necessary reviews. That is a quality product that will go into the client hands, and it contains the plan sets with these disciplines, with this estimate, and I expect the estimate to have gone through a master estimator review, really, really spelling it out. And I do this even with myself. So essentially when I'm talking to someone, whether it's a client or just, a vice president or a leader, whatever it is, whatever person, I like to spell out what I think they're expecting from me. Because this way I at least get closer to what we're both thinking we're going to deliver. I know people say communicating is the most important thing, but honestly, after hearing the speaker at this conference saying, really, it's more of aligning expectations and articulating your expectations from yourself, from others, etc. That's really the key there, and ensuring that we're all aligned in that sense. I'm starting to sound so corporate. God. The thing is, these are real mistakes that I've made in the past. I've assumed things, and I've genuinely learned to adjust my way of communicating and my way of managing based on all these mistakes. And they've really gotten me to the next level. I would say that right now, my career is taking off in a way that I never expected because of all these mistakes that I made. I've learned so much more from my mistakes and failures than from my successes. And as much as I have a little bit of resentment from people who kind of have been tough on me, they've also been the reason that I was able to adjust and correct. Yeah. I hope you liked this video. It's a little bit rambly. It's a little bit stream of consciousness. I'll get back to more technical videos as soon as I can. Thank you so much for staying to the end, and I hope I get to see you in the next one. Bye, everyone.